don't trust the stats, I think. Don't trust the data that you're seeing on the screen, especially if that data was systems that were built before AI came along. Hi, this is Dixon Jones, and I'm here for SEO in 2026.
Dixon, what's your number one SEO tip for 2026?
My tip is that in 2026, I think you should really think about what you are trying to measure when it comes to internet marketing and search marketing and your website, because I think the buying behavior of individuals is changing dramatically with the clear advent of AI, and the user is going to be sending out their little AI bots to ask questions of your website instead of going there themselves. So if you wanted to say, let's say it's buying a Hoover, vacuum cleaner, because Hoover's a brand. If you're trying to buy a vacuum cleaner, then you might ask, what's the best vacuum cleaner for pet hair, for example. Now, of course, Shark and Dyson and Hoover are all going to want to be in that list of recommendations from the AI, but it's the AI that's going to do any investigating. So potentially an AI is going to go and find these brands, go and have a look at those brands, compare the things about pet hairs, and then come back and provide an answer to the user and say, you know what, this brand is slightly better than this one for this particular type of pet hair, whatever it may be, and give a complete response. At that point, the user doesn't need to click on any of the websites, but they will still buy a Shark or a Dyson or Electrolux or whatever it may be. But they'll just, have made their decision. So all of the metrics that we've been using for the last 20 years have really been measured around, obviously, purchase on a website, if you're doing a software as a service or something like that. But if you've got a product, it's really about the visitors that come into the website. And that's been a key performance metric. Has your visitor come from search or from pay-per-click or from direct or affiliate or whatever it may be? And that's been the mentality of everybody. But that doesn't really work on two levels in an AI-driven world. The first is, as I've explained, the AI is doing the search for you. But the other problem with it is that the AI typically doesn't trigger a visit on most web analytics systems. So most web analytics systems are JavaScript based. In other words, the web page loads and it triggers a JavaScript call, and that will, record the visitor. But LLMs are really lazy when they come to crawling the site. They just want the text and that's it. And if the text doesn't appear, they can't be bothered to call all the JavaScript. So oftentimes it won't even come up as a click in your systems. So that means that you're going to have to change the way in which you measure traffic or measure success. Yeah.
Are you talking about users just using LLMs and LLMs then making the decision to visit your website?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We don't really need to think too deeply about it to realize that that's happening. We've probably all done it ourselves. We haven't, necessarily realized it, but we are using our phones. It could be something on Facebook, it could be Grok on Twitter, it could be all sorts of other bits and pieces. And you're asking a question of an AI machine, and all of the tools and methodologies that I've heard from most people seem to assume that they're still trying to get traffic to the website, when the truth of the matter is the human is trying to get an answer to a question. And the answer to the question doesn't necessarily mean going to the website. It means, potentially sending their little bot out to the website, even though that's not what they do, but that's not what they're thinking. But their decision is made prior to any visit to a website. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So what percentage of traffic are we talking about at the moment? Is it really significant?
I think that really depends on the demographic and the kind of person that you're talking to. Funnily enough, I think the kids, the students, they've been using GPTs for quite a while for their homework. So they're very, very comfortable with using ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever one they use, and probably use it considerably more than, more us more mature, dare I say it, David, us more mature people. And then there's, of course, demographics like the SEO industry who are clearly using it ahead of the curve as well. So I think that in the middle, there's still a lot of learning for individuals. But what is clear to me is that this stuff is coming through to people even though they don't realize it. So they're using their phones. It's going to be built. It's built into the operating systems. It's built into the systems. They don't know that they are using an AI. They're just choosing to ask their question in whatever device is in front of them or whatever methodology is in front of them. They don't necessarily know whether it's using ChatGPT or Gemini or a traditional search engine. They're just changing their behavior. And they're changing their behavior because they're getting their answer to their question quicker and they're getting a more in-depth one. They don't have to go to all of those 10 blue links and read all that information to make their decision. They just have to ask one question and everything's done for them. And I think that's a significant difference.
Are there any tools out there that are doing a lot better job of actually measuring the visits from AI crawlers? Because you mentioned that many traditional tools aren't doing that.
No, well, this is why I think that each business needs to really think about what is happening in practical terms, because it's going to be different for different types of businesses. So I run a software as a service. Clearly, in order for anybody to buy my service, they're going to have to come to the website and interact with the website. That's not the same for Dyson and Electrolux. That's not the same for any sort of product-based business. They could make their decision and then go and buy on Amazon. They could go and make their decision and go and buy in a store, but they're still requiring the information that is on the website potentially for that decision to be made, but they don't make that understanding. So for some businesses, certainly news businesses, whatever, it's still about the visits to the website. For product-based businesses, it's not about that. It's understanding where that user journey decision is being made for the user, and clicks may be completely irrelevant in a future world. But that's not to say that the website isn't irrelevant. It's just that the information is being collected in a way that isn't tracked on a daily basis or on a per visit basis. So you've got to think about your own user journey, make your own decisions as to what's important and what key performance indicators you're going to use as a business. But ultimately, it is hard to track. I don't think many are doing it very well. One thing that you can do if you want to track visitors, is to go back to the old systems we used to use, which was log tracking. So back in the 90s and early 2000s, this JavaScript approach to tracking visitors didn't really happen. What was happening was we were using log tracking software as a general rule, and that will get picked up. So the LLMs will get picked up in the log tracking software. But interestingly, I've been into sort of a few hosting packages recently, and people seem to have forgotten about logs. They're not always there. They're not always easy to find, and you need a methodology for analyzing lines and lines of data. And log file tracking came with a whole bunch of other problems as well, because it was making requests that made it very difficult to understand what was a user and what wasn't. There are problems with all the methodologies that are out there, but it's a real opportunity to stop and say the world is changing. User behavior is changing on the internet. People may be on their phone in a mobile phone app, or they might be on Facebook and using Facebook's meta thing. There is no search per se, no Google lookup. It's still maybe Google Power in the answer, but it's coming through a completely different set of resources. Could be you asking your television.
Yeah. I mean, you say it's certainly down to the type of business and down to your own personal circumstances, but you also say that product-based businesses, clicks could perhaps be irrelevant relatively soon. In that kind of scenario, how do you measure organic search success?
I don't know. I don't know the answer, but I do know that assuming the old systems is the way is a mistake. The way that we are doing it, we are presenting through the Wayco's business, is we're trying to work out the prominence of your brand in LLM responses in the context of a particular topic or idea compared to the other brands that are out there. So we're trying to record a share of voice within LLM responses. And that's one kind of measure that we're working on. And then the other is, well, how well does the LLM response reflect what your website says? So we use vector analysis to look at the topics that the LLM says are important to your business in a context, or what it knows about your business in the context of a particular topic. And then we compare that to the topics that you're talking about on the website. Is it accurate? Are there fake facts or whatever? And then we turn that into a score between 0 and 100. So it's an interesting methodology, but it's not it's a predictive methodology, I suppose, a little bit. It's not an easy thing to do to then tie that back to your budgeting principles, your marketing budget, sorry. So we've got all the problems that you had in the 60s and the 70s of, I know that 80% of my advertising is wasted. I just don't know which 80%. That is very much still here. And I think that the mistake that people will be making, and I'm sure are making already, is that they have something in place, but that something that's in place is dependent on trying to track the click back to the original data source or where the money was spent. And that's already flawed. And for some businesses, it could be incredibly flawed already.
Should each business be trying to develop their own multi-attribution model and incorporating visibility within generative search as part of that?
Well, I don't think so. I think that you should be seeing what the qualitative response is from generative search. So in other words, it's the words on the page that come back. When you say, what's the best vacuum cleaner for pet hair or for dog hair or for cat hair or whatever it may be, I think the quality of that response and how well your brand is represented in that response is the best thing to actually measure. And then it becomes a case of, well, how many people are using that channel generally, because to give you some kind of idea of where people are convinced, because they will be convinced by that answer. If that AI says this brand is markedly better than the others, they're sold. And you can't track this. So you can't necessarily track that individual person to a sale. It's just not possible. It's the same as having a big banner on the M4 as you drive into London, and then saying, well, I got an uplift, but none of them clicked on the scan code on the banner. So that's all you can do. You can understand that the decision is being made in that AI result. That purchase decision is being made in that AI result, and they're either going to buy yours or your competitors. All you can do is track your share of voice in that AI result.
When an SEO consultant is talking to stakeholders within a business about brand visibility within AI search, how receptive, from your perception, from you talking to SEO consultants, do you think stakeholders are to using that as a new metric?
Oh, I don't think they are at the moment. I think, particularly at the board CMO level, I think that marketing directors want this dashboard. They want this feeling that they've got £100 to spend. They can spend £4 over here, £17 over there, £24 over there, and whatever. And they've got these pots of money, and then they can see the return on investment of each of those pots of money. That's what they want to think. But it doesn't make it so. You can wish the world that that's the way it was, but it never was anyway. Absolutely never was. Word of mouth was never properly tracked in that situation. And word of mouth is the most powerful way of marketing for many, many brands.
Dixon, what's the key takeaway from the tip you shared today?
Don't trust the stats, I think. Don't trust the data that you're seeing on the screen, especially if that data was systems that were built before AI came along.
Dixon Jones is CEO at Inlinks and Wakey. Find out more over at wakey.io. That's WAIKAY.io. Dixon, thanks so much for being part of SEO in 2026.
Thanks, David.
I've been your host, David Bain. Get your copy of SEO in 2026, the book, over at SEOin2026.com.